and welcome back to part 2 of this video where we are looking at phonological terms. Paper 1, Task 1 and Task 2 are all about terminology, defining, providing definitions and giving examples. So let's have a quick review of that now. As mentioned in previous videos, Paper 1, Task 1 is all about providing definitions for terms, 6 of them to get 6 marks across these various areas. And this is part 2 of looking at phonological terms here. And if you haven't watched part 1 in this video, it's a good idea to go back and do that now, so this will all make a lot more sense. In Paper 1 Task 2, this is where you provide definitions and examples for terms. 4 of them in total, totaling up to 12 marks. We've all been through this before, so just have a quick read if you need a refresh. For phonological terms, these can be features of connected speech, which we looked at in part 1. These are your assimilations, your elisions, your reductions, and these are very important for Paper 1 Task 5, where you have to analyze features of connected speech. However, in this part of the video, we're looking at classification of phonemes and general phonological principles. So there is a 3-way classification system for phonemes, starting with voicing, place of articulation, and manner of articulation. Voicing is whether it is voiced or unvoiced, whether the vocal cords are engaged. Place of articulation is where the sound is produced in the mouth, and manner of articulation is how it is made. So for example, we have Task 2 from June 2014 here, alveolar plosive. Alveolar refers to the place of articulation, the alveolar ridge. Plosive refers to the manner of articulation where air is released explosively. This term doesn't include voicing, but a full classification would be voiced alveolar plosive. And we'll follow that up by looking at some phonological principles. An example of which you can see here from the June 2015 exam, tonic syllable. Starting with classification of phonemes and specifically vowels, you might be familiar with this, commonly referred to as the phonemic chart or British English phonemic chart. This was constructed by the pronunciation guru known as Adrian Underhill. And in this top half of the chart here, you can see all these symbols for vowel sounds. Over on this side, we have the monophthongs. So a monophthong is a pure vowel sound whose articulation at both the beginning and end is relatively fixed. It does not glide to a new position of articulation, e.g. oo, blue, shoe, you, moon, to, few, through. I've used this example because you can see how there is such a big mismatch between English spelling and sounds. These are all spelt different ways, but it is in fact the same sound, oo. Now, when you're giving an example for these, you only need to actually give an example of the sound. We usually write them in slanted brackets like this. Ooh. I'm just writing the words here for illustrative purposes. Now contrast this with the diphthongs over here. You can see they're written with 2 characters, and this is because a diphthong is a combination of 2 adjacent vowel sounds within the same syllable. The position of articulation is different between beginning and end. So for example, we have I here, and this is combined from a starting position somewhere around here, R, and finishing around about here, E, I, giving you this sound here. So that's what we mean here. The position of articulation is different between beginning and end. It glides between them. And some examples, my, tie, white, die, fight, height. Again, you don't need to write the words, you just need to write the sound here as your example. Getting into a few more specifics, this sound here has a very specific name, you've probably heard of it, called the schwa, which is a German word. And a schwa is a weak vowel phoneme represented in phonemic script as e.g. the, America. Down here we have r, w, y, and these collectively are called the semivowels. Semivowel is a sound that is phonetically similar to a vowel sound but functions as the syllable boundary rather than the nucleus of a syllable. Nucleus is the vowel sound of any syllable. So in blue, the nucleus is oo, and the onset here is b. In eyes, the nucleus is I, and the coda is z. However, combine them together, blue eyes, now we have an intrusive sound that we saw in previous video, wa, which is also a semi-vowel, which is at the boundary between the 2 words, blue eyes. Moving on to consonants, which we can see here in the lower half of the chart. And let's first look at voicing. A voiced consonant is a consonant sound that's produced by vibrating the vocal cords, e.g. zzz. You can tell that the vocal cords are vibrating if you place 2 fingers on the side of your neck, as if you're feeling your pulse, and then say the sound zzz. Whereas an unvoiced consonant is a consonant sound that's produced without vibrating the vocal cords. S. There is no vibrations happening in your throat here because this is unvoiced. S. Z. S. And you can see these pairs of voiced and unvoiced consonants all across the phonemic chart. So s, z, sh, zh, th, v. And with the stop sounds or the plosives, p, b, t, d. If you're wondering about the bottom row, all of these are voiced except h, and all the vowels indeed are also voiced. E, e. If you were to devoice a vowel, you'd have to whisper it. E, e. With these pairs of voiced and unvoiced consonants, it's also worth noting that the place of articulation and the manner of articulation remain the same. So these two are both dental fricatives. They use the teeth, the tongue, and they cause friction to make the sound. The only difference is that this is unvoiced, and this is voiced. One final thing to note about this chart is that the way it's been constructed with these consonants here, this represents the front of the mouth. So these are the labial sounds, p, b, and it goes further back. So p, t, ch, k, f, s, sh. Now we need to get into a bit of anatomy as we look at the places of articulation for consonants. So looking at a cross-section of our head here, and looking at these spaces in between, we have the mouth or oral cavity, as it's more formally known. Above that and connected to it, the nose and nasal cavity, and further down, these form the throat. Combine all these together and you get the vocal tract, which is all of the space from the vocal cords until the air escapes to the outside. The most prominent articulator in your mouth and responsible for the majority of sounds is indeed the tongue. When I say articulator, this just means a surface in the mouth. And then starting at the front and working our way back, we have the upper lip and the lower lip. In brackets here, this is the Latinized adjective which is used to describe this place of articulation. So labial means it's produced by the lips. Then we have the upper teeth here. Dental, easy to remember, dentist. The alveolar ridge, that is this little ridge behind the teeth, and the adjective for that is just alveolar. Behind that we have the hard palate, and palatal is the adjective here. I've colored it in white here because this is actually bone, and that's why it's hard. You can kind of feel this at the top of your mouth with your tongue or with a finger. And this contrasts with the velum, which is a bit further back, which is sometimes used interchangeably with soft palate. Soft palate is not bone and it has some flexibility. The adjective here is velar. And down here, just out of view, we have the glottis, and this gives rise to the adjective glottal. There are some more articulators in the mouth, but these are the ones that we need to know in order to produce English sounds. Okay, places of articulation done. Now let's move on to the manner of articulation and how you would actually word these definitions. Starting with fricative, which is a manner of articulation caused by two articulators being close enough together so that the movement of air between them can be heard. Examples here, f, v, th, v, s, z, sh, zh, and h. So let's just take one of these sounds, this one here, which is a dental fricative, v, as in this, that. So here, the tongue is coming between the teeth and air is coming between them. Because these are so close together, that is causing friction, which is making that sound. So the friction makes the fricatives. That's an easy way to remember those. Next up, we have plosive sounds. A plosive is a manner of articulation where there is a complete closure somewhere in the vocal tract. Air pressure builds up behind the closure and is then released explosively. Examples here, p, b, d, k, g. So let's have a look here. P. And this is a bilabial plosive. Bilabial, bi meaning two, so it means it uses both the upper and the lower lip, which come into contact. They make a closure. Air pressure builds inside the oral cavity here, and then you release it explosively. Air rushes out and you get a plosive p sound. Nasals are what they say on the tin, and it's a manner of articulation where there is a complete closure somewhere in the mouth with the soft palate lowered and air escapes through the nasal cavity. So remember, the soft palate is the velum here, so this gets lowered. There is some closure in here, which means air cannot escape through the mouth, and therefore it has to be rediverted through the nose or the nasal cavity here. The three in English are Again, looking at this is a bilabial nasal, and so both lips are closed and air comes out through the nasal cavity here. An approximant. This is a manner of articulation where one articulator moves close to another, but they are not close enough to cause friction or stop airflow. So with fricatives, like v, the articulators were close enough to cause friction. However, with approximants, they are not. And this gives rise to the semivowels r, y, and w. So to remember this, you can think that it approximates the place of articulation, but it doesn't get close enough. Affricate is a manner of articulation where there is complete closure somewhere in the mouth with the soft palate raised. Remember, the velum is the soft palate. Air pressure builds up behind the closure and is then released, but less forcefully than plosives. There's two in English, ch and j. So similar to plosives, but less forceful, and the soft palate here is raised. A lateral is a manner of articulation caused by airflow passing around the sides of the tongue. So in this diagram, in front and behind it, and in English, this is the l sound. Now let's combine place and manner of articulation together, as you will quite often be asked to define them as a single term. Some common ones are alveolar plosive. So we're just combining the definition for the manner of articulation with the place. A consonant sound produced by the tongue touching the alveolar ridge to create a closure in the vocal tract. Behind this, air pressure builds and is released explosively. T, d. So we've got the alveolar ridge here. The tongue comes up to the ridge and creates a closure, and then air pressure is released explosively. Alveolar plosive. Compared with an alveolar fricative, s and z, which is the same place of articulation, just a different manner. A consonant sound produced by the tongue coming into close enough contact with the alveolar ridge so that the movement of air between them can be heard. Here the tongue is getting very close to, but not touching the alveolar ridge, as in the alveolar plosive. Bilabial plosive. Bilabial, as we said before, is the two lips here. A consonant sound produced by the two lips touching each other to create a closure in the vocal tract. Behind this, air pressure builds and is released explosively. P, b. Compared with the bilabial nasal we looked at earlier, a consonant sound produced by the two lips touching each other to create a closure in the mouth with the soft palate lowered. Air escapes through the nasal cavity. Dental fricative, th, v. Dental, meaning teeth and tongue, and only the upper teeth. That's why lower teeth is not labeled here. So the tongue makes close enough contact with the upper teeth so that it causes friction. A consonant sound produced by the tongue coming into close enough contact with the upper teeth so that the movement of air between them can be heard. Velar plosive. Now we're going further back to the velum here. A consonant sound produced by the tongue touching the velum to create a closure in the vocal tract. Behind this, air pressure builds and is released explosively, k and g. So I won't go through every combination, as it will get a little bit tedious, but you can kind of see the idea of combining these definitions together. If you only got a part of this, then that would be a partial definition and only net you 1 mark. Just 2 more before we finish up though. Labiodental fricative. Now, when you have something like labiodental, that means it's using both the lips and the teeth, and it's caused by friction. So lips and teeth, think f, v. So a consonant sound produced by the lower lip coming into close enough contact with the upper teeth so that the movement of air between them can be heard. Lower lip, upper teeth, This is how you make the f and v sounds. And the last one is the glottal stop. This is a type of consonant sound produced by obstructing airflow in the glottis, so down here. For example, in the exclamation uh-oh, there is a glottal stop between the two syllables here. Now the glottis is where the vocal cords are. And although you wouldn't think of a glottal stop as a type of consonant, as it doesn't produce a clearly audible sound with air release, its manner of articulation is called occlusive, and so it is still defined as a consonant sound. Place and manner of articulation done. Now moving on to the final part of this video where we're looking at phonological principles. So let's have a look at this cute little fella. He is a little dog. Now look at this word little. It has two L phonemes, one at the beginning or the onset, one at the end or the coda. And listen to how they are different. Little. Now, if you write it in phonemic script, these two phonemes look the same. However, you've just heard that they are indeed different. Reason being is this l is velarized, which means the back of the tongue here goes up towards the velum. And if you go between these sounds, you can feel the back of your tongue pushing up here. So two sounds written the same, but are pronounced slightly differently depending on where they are in a syllable or word. Another example of this principle is in the word stop that top. Again, these two t sounds are written the same, however they're pronounced differently. We don't say stop that top. It's stop. If I just remove the S, stop that top. So again, these are pronounced slightly differently depending on where they are within the syllable. One last example is the skill to make the kill. Skill, not skill. Skill, gill, to make the kill. And what we're demonstrating in these examples are allophones. An allophone is a variation of the pronunciation of a phoneme depending on its position within a word, e.g. light L, like, dark L, will. Have a look at this sentence. I think that this video is informative. Did you understand it? I think probably you did. I think that this video is informative. How about this one? I think that this video was informative. Informative? What does that mean? I think that this video is informative. Informative? I think that this video is informative. So likely it was harder for you to make sense of these sentences because of the misplaced stress in these two words here. And even though these dental fricatives here were realized as t and d, this is actually quite common in a variety of accents of English. So very likely you understood this. How about this one? He liked this video. I'm pretty sure you all understand that as he likes this video, even though they've missed out this final consonant cluster. He likes this video. After watching this video, she asks a question. She asks a question. Again, you probably understand this as after watching this video, she asked a question with the final consonant cluster, kst, which is a bit of a mouthful and often just gets dropped, so you end up with something more like this anyway. Now compare that with the intelligibility of this sentence. I find the Roman ripped very easily. Romans? Ripped? Were they? Gladiators, perhaps. I am Spartacus! But doesn't really make much sense. I find the Roman crypt very easy. The Roman crypt? Easy to what? Easy to find? Easy to navigate? We're talking about catacombs in Venice here?
Oh, rats.
Let's try one more. I find the Roman script very easy. Okay, now it makes sense. Would you have got there from these two? Unlikely, because you're missing the initial consonant cluster scra here. Whereas if I said something like, I find the Roman script very easy, likely you will understand that as, I find the Roman script very easy. So what's the point of all this? Well, this is all about the phonological core. The phonological core is the essential features of pronunciation needed to be understood when speaking English as an international language. For example, initial consonant clusters. We're looking at you here, Roman script, not a crypt or not someone who is ripped. In addition to consonant clusters, we can also say word stress here is also essential in order to be understood, but not necessarily final consonant clusters as in asked. Okay, moving on. Taken test. Has he the? Which one makes more sense? Probably the first one. But if we combine them together, we get has he taken the test? Or said more naturally, has he taken the test? We can see the stressed syllables here on take and test, and stressed syllables are in content words. These are your nouns, adjectives, and verbs which convey the main ideas of the utterance. So take, test. These are the main ideas, and we can kind of understand this even without the unstressed syllables, which are the function words. So these are auxiliaries, pronouns, determiners, conjunctions, which serve more of a grammatical function, and they're often reduced to schwa. So auxiliary has, we don't say has, we say has. He, reduced to e, has he. We can even elide the initial h sound, has he taken? Has he taken the test? And what we're talking about here is prominence. Prominence being the stressing of certain syllables within words and sentences. This usually involves increasing the length and volume of the syllable and contributes to the prosody of the language, e.g. the dog is white. And prominence together with rhythm and intonation collectively make up the prosody of a language. Side note, English is considered a stress-timed language, as that is how the rhythm is realized. Let's have a look at these old gents. What do they say? Where do you live? I live in a house by the river. River here is answering the question where. Therefore, this actually has more prominence than both the other content words live and house. So even though these words are stressed, this one is more stressed and there's more of an intonation shift. Therefore, this is called the tonic syllable. I live in a house by the river. You live in a flat by the river, don't you? No, I live in the house by the river. Again, you can hear the tonic syllable here has more prominence than the other stressed syllables because it's providing previously unknown information. The first gent thought he lived in the flat, when in fact he actually lives in the house. This is also known as contrastive stress. You bought the house by the river, didn't you? No, I live in the house by the river. Again, you can hear this tonic syllable here. So to put this into words, a tonic syllable is the most stressed syllable in an utterance where the main intonation change occurs. It is usually determined by new information being shared between speakers, e.g., where's your house? It's by the river. And this concludes the video on knowing your phonological terms. In the next video, we'll be looking at some of the hardest terms to define and exemplify, and we'll be taking a deep dive into some more complex linguistic principles. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave a comment below if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.